Hello, my fellow Americans. This is Bill Lipinski, and next up is our cleanup hitter, Ray Hanania.
And I always like to be the cleanup batter. I don't know much about baseball or sports for that matter, but to me, and I'm sure with Bill too, although he knows more about sports than I do, politics is the only important sport in this country. It's February 15, 2024, and this is season 3, episode 6. And we're going to be talking about the issues about Biden's memory and how it may or may not impact his reelection and standing in the Democratic Party. And then we're going to take a quick look at the New York special election in the 3rd Congressional District that was won by a Democrat that was held by George Santos, the guy who basically made up his resume and was forced to step down when it turned out everything he said was a lie. Bill, let's start with what were we going to talk about? It was a issue about who I can't remember. Oh, the president of the United States, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Oh no, Joe Biden. That's who it was. Joe Biden. He's having memory issues, and is that a big deal? You think going into this election coming up?
Oh no, nobody cares about that whatsoever, right? Okay, that our president can't remember who the head of this country is or the head of that country. No, seriously speaking, he unfortunately somewhat reminds me of now the fellow that ran for vice president.
Stockdale?
James Stockdale. I think he was a
Right.
former. He started out the debate against I think it was against
Dan Quayle. But they were vice presidents, right? Al Gore, Dan Quayle, and James Stockdale were running, right? Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm doing here, and I'm not sure I know who I am.
It didn't help him much, did it?
Did not, no. I don't think he was
Now
joking. I think he was serious.
Now, just as a reminder, was that the first time Ross Perot ran where he had the charts and everything, and he was on TV saying, "Now look at this chart," and he did that whole thing, and everybody remembered. He actually got a pretty good vote in that election, didn't he?
He had a lot of money. He was a very wealthy man.
Yeah, he had something to do with computers. I remember I had one of his Texas Instrument computers. I think it was. Those were pretty good way back in the 90s. Now they'd be considered, I think they were called trash 80s, and now they are trash. Nobody can use them. But yeah, so do you remember that election very well? I just vaguely remember it
very well. I think that Ross Perot's candidacy cost Bush the election. I think he took votes away from Bush, and that helped Bill Clinton become president of the United States. I believe that Ross Perot's platform was very similar to the Republican platform that year. Consequently, that hurt Bush.
Yeah, and I vaguely remember it because Ross Perot did make a powerful presence. Obviously, because of his money, he didn't win, but it was like the first time I thought maybe an independent could win. It probably didn't help that his vice presidential candidate say he didn't remember why he was here or what he was doing. But memory, let me ask you a question. Memory issues really matter at the presidential election, because I remember Gerald Ford, and I remember how his issue was he was a bumbler. He would trip, he would fall, he'd get hit by golf balls, he'd get bounced. I think he tripped down coming down Air Force one time, and it was a constant thing. People can put up with a bumbler, right? But they can't it seems like it's a big issue if you don't know who you are or you don't know who you're talking about when you're having a press conference where you mix two subjects and you mix up the presidents of two different countries. How important do you think that is in this election, the memory?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's very important. As you know, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump at all. I think he's a reprehensible character, but I'm beginning to be really concerned about Joe Biden because I don't really think that Biden is as bad as a lot of people say he is. A lot of people in the news are really, both on the left and the right, because many on the left want to get rid of him as their presidential candidate, bring in someone who's more progressive, more liberal. But unfortunately, I don't think he's as bad as people say he is. But I do believe that his memory is not good enough to be reelected president of the United States. I think that he's done some good things, but there's many things that I think he could have done that he didn't do, maybe because of the people around him but I think he's vulnerable to those people because he does have a problem with his memory, and countless times he has demonstrated that to the American people. I think 75% of the people don't believe he should run again.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
that's a staggering number.
yeah, he's 81 years old. He'll probably be 82 this year at some point, and he's probably our oldest president. I think I saw somebody say he was our oldest president.
He would be our oldest president.
And I remember Ronald Reagan. Now Reagan wasn't that old, but he was old, and he was pretty good the first term, I think, and then the second term, I think he kind of lost it. But Nancy Reagan took a very active role, and I think I remember correctly that there was some discussion about, Reagan's cognitive abilities and memory, and the problems that he was having. I think it was Alzheimer's. I can't remember the exact issue at this point, but it was an issue for him. But he wasn't running for re-election.
Well, in the second time he ran for re-election, I mean, the second time he ran, those were questions about his ability to remember things, to figure things out. Now, a lot of people have said that, being a great fan of Ronald Reagan, like I am,
Right.
I refuse to accept that. But some people who are conservative people who liked him very much, supported him, felt in the last year and a half of his second term, he was definitely suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And it was less than a year after he left office that he made the announcement that he was suffering from Alzheimer's. And I remember him saying that he would be drifting into the twilight soon, and he wanted to make sure he said, goodbye to everyone and thanks everyone, because probably he will not be able to do so much longer.
Right, and I know that just looking at his bio, he died in 2004 at the age of 93. He served from 81 until 89, which means that when he left office, we're talking about he was probably 88, 89 years old. He was up there in age also.
I don't think so, Ray. I don't think it was that old.
2004, 9. Oh, you're right. 14 years. Yeah. No, he died in his 70s. You're right.
Yeah.
So Biden takes it way past any problems that Ronald Reagan had. And Ronald Reagan was such a powerful president, you could almost excuse it because his first term was so strong.
Yes,
this is Biden's first term, and he's already having cognitive memory issues. Reagan had some issues. He was younger. But in the last part of his second term, I remember them talking about, it was like they were covering up for him. I think we learned that later, but he had some really strong people around him. Biden, I think the thing with Biden is if he is having memory problems, he doesn't have strong people around him that we could identify with. Kamala Harris,
he has a lot.
She scares me.
He has a lot of Obama people around him. I don't think he chose a lot of his own people for one reason or another. I think he chose a lot of Obama people, and they definitely are more to the left than Biden
Reagan
used to be.
Right.
Now he's been slowly moving further left, but I think that's because of the people around him, the people that work for him, the people that give him advice. I really wish his wife would, tell him that he had a successful first term. Why don't you retire?
Right.
We can go off in the sunset and enjoy life. You did it for your country. You got to be president of the United States. And let the Democrats select someone else. I probably will not like who they select, but I think it would be better for the country if we had at least one person running for president who was on top of all the issues. I mean, the other guy, when he's telling countries in Europe, if you don't pay up your dues, I'm telling the Russians to go and do anything you want to do. And Nikki Haley with the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. So, I mean, he's got his problems also.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, listen, Trump has a bigger problem than memory problems, though. He's too petty. He cannot, if you throw some little petty remark at him at a press conference, he'll spend the entire press conference attacking you instead of talking about the subject that brought him to the microphone during his press conference. That's his biggest problem. He just is so thin-skinned. He hates the media and he can't respond the proper way. You'd think that a president who hates the media would find sympathy among Americans, and he does get it. He has a big following, and I think part of that is because they hate the media too. But he panders to the media. He plays into that pettiness and thinks it makes him look good, and it doesn't. It makes him look bad.
He likes to be in the spotlight. He likes the attention. So he's got to play to the media to a certain degree, even if he's attacking them every other day. His ego is just monumental.
Yeah, it is. And just going back to Biden, though, it seems like more and more people are concerned about Biden. He had that press conference, I think it was a week ago, where he was talking about migrants and the migrant issue and how he was going to deal with the president of Mexico. But he identified the president of, and I couldn't tell you, by the way, who the president of Mexico is without looking him up. In all honesty, I had to look him up.
I can't tell you who the president of Egypt is, though.
Well, Egypt, because I'm Arab, I can think. But Biden used the president of Egypt's name to refer to the president of Mexico. And the disconcerting aspect of that is this. There are two issues in the world that we are really focused on: migrants and the Middle East. And it suggests that he couldn't keep those two issues apart. That's what scares me more than somebody who mistakenly, uses somebody else's name. If Egypt and the Middle East weren't an issue, and he referred to the president of Mexico as President El Sisi, I would say, okay, that was just a dumb mistake. Maybe the names are familiar, but it's not a dumb mistake because those two issues are now, confused in his mind. That worries me. And I think that people are starting to see that, and he held that press conference to confront the issue and the criticism that he was having memory problems, and then made that memory lapse mistake during that press conference, which only played into it. I don't see this getting better for him. I see it getting worse.
I don't see it getting better for him either. And I do see it getting worse. I totally agree with you. I think you're right. But I don't know what the Democrats are going to do about it. There's more and more talk about Michelle Obama, but I still cannot believe that she's going to move forward to run for president. She was never happy with politics. She may be more happy with it now that she's had 8 years in the White House and being catered to the way the first lady is and the president is. But I still don't believe she's going to run. But I believe there's a number of people in the Democratic Party who, if there were truly primaries, probably wouldn't beat Biden because people are so concerned about his memory.
Yeah, and I don't think that Kamala Harris would be a good replacement for Biden if they decide to do something. The only person I can think of that would be in the Democratic tradition of the husband, a former president, putting up his wife, as Bill Clinton did with Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton's problem was she was too arrogant. She conveyed this entitlement like she was better than everybody. And I think what really hurt her was not saying there are people in America who don't like my views. What she said was there were people in America who were stupid because they don't like my views. And she referred to them as the deplorables. That arrogance, I think, is what destroyed her candidacy and allowed this guy, Donald Trump, whose ego is way beyond the atmospherics and, out into outer space to win. So, but I think honestly that, and I've talked to some Republicans that you and I know, and I asked them, I said, what if Michelle Obama were to run? And they all seem to think she would be far more powerful, more effective, and it would be such a change. Because there are a lot of people that they may not have agreed with Barack Obama's all his policies, but Michelle, and we've talked about this before, she was very disgruntled and unhappy with her husband being in politics until he became the U.S. Senator and then became the President of the United States. She completely changed. And there were, I remember running into her when he was a Illinois legislator, and she looked depressed at that Museum of Science and Industry with their two little babies when I introduced her to my son, who was only 4 years old at the time. Now he's 22. We're talking about 18 years have since passed. Her transformation has been phenomenal. And I think she could be a very strong candidate. I just wonder, with Biden being so close to the Obamas, that they would pull the rug out from under him and put Michelle up there. That would be a very hard personal choice on their part.
No, there's no way that you're going to replace Biden forcibly. He's going to have to be willing to step down. There's not enough time to build up another candidate to get things organized. If there's going to be any resistance on Biden's part, that's why I had mentioned earlier, if his wife would talk to him and say he had a very, very successful first term, why don't we just give it up now and we'll ride off in the sunset and enjoy the rest of our life? I want to go back to that. I believe the reason he held that press conference was because he was very upset that the attorney said that he couldn't remember the day his son, Bo, died.
Right.
And I think that infuriated him, and that really motivated him to go out and hold that press conference. I thought he did well, but I'm one of the few people that thought he did well, other than Mexico and Egypt.
I thought he did well. He did do well until we got to the point where would we use it, two big conflicts, the one in the Middle East, which is spreading across the Middle East and seems to be getting out of hand. And we have the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and we have so much billions being thrown at these foreign countries. My concern has always been that Biden started out as a weak president, that because he was a weak president, it sent the wrong message to Putin that this is a guy that I could pull the wool over and I can do whatever I want. The U.S. is not going to stop me. And I think that in the case of Israel, now Israel is totally justified in responding to the Hamas attack on October 7th by targeting Hamas. They're a sophisticated military, one of the top 4 in the world. And we fund them and they have all this money. I know they could have targeted those Hamas leaders and taken them out and the Hamas fighters. But without Biden, a strong president to, restrain them, their anger and their emotion, they went all out and they just bombed entire cities and villages, and they've killed 30,000 people. And they're, as much as Netanyahu says that there are 20,000 Hamas people that we've killed, I don't believe that, because nearly almost a half of all the people killed are women and children in Gaza, and I don't believe that those are Hamas people. So I think that those two examples show how weak Biden has been, and we're being trampled by countries. And I'm worried about which is the next country that's going to stand up and say, I don't care what the United States says, I'm going to do whatever I want. Our image was able to stop that. Do you think our image is strong enough to impact world actions today in Europe, South America, in the communist world?
Excuse me, it doesn't look like it, that's for sure. I mean, what are we going to do with the Ukraine? What are we going to do with the Israelis, Palestinians, Taiwan? I mean, those are 3 hot issues that we have to really, make sure that we know what we're doing. Taiwan, we have to defend Taiwan because they produce so many of the advanced chips. Okay. Right. So we can't leave that go to the communists. I believe that we have to continue to support the Ukraine now that we're into it, because if we don't, Russia will take over the Ukraine and they'll look for somebody else to go after. Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, one of those other countries that are right on their border. Okay. And then in regards to the situation with the border, no, I wanted to talk about
Taiwan, migrants,
Ukraine, and Israel. We should have restrained the Israelis as far as the damage, the destruction that they have done. Now, I totally support them. They had a perfect right to go after Hamas. I'm glad that they did. It's a terrible terrorist organization. But no matter what anybody says to me, I don't understand why it was necessary to destroy all of these buildings. Hamas couldn't have possibly be hiding in every one of these buildings.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to dive into the Middle East, but I think that's the most important thing. they went further because they felt they could get away with it without being restrained. The United States has always been the fence for them. We fund them, we defend them. Nothing goes past the United Nations without our vote. So we were an important part of that. And I think because we're not exerting our influence, I think people are doing more. And I agree with you. I think you raised the point that I hadn't raised, and I should have. The point you raised about the Chinese and Taiwan. What stops Taiwan from invading and taking over Taiwan? What stops China from invading and taking over Taiwan? What's going to stop them? What would we do? What could we possibly do if tomorrow they said, we're just going to invade and go into it? What do we do?
Well, we certainly have the resources to defend Taiwan if we choose to do so. And I believe that we would, for the reason that
really
they manufacture so many of the high-class chips that go into computers, Ray. I think we would have to. I don't think we could lose that supply. Now, we are slowly converting that manufacturing to the United States, but it's going to be another 5-6 years because until we can make enough of them to take care of our own needs. So yes, I think we defend Taiwan.
Well, I think that there's a need to defend Taiwan. I'm just not quite sure that President Biden would announce that we're sending troops to confront the Chinese in Taiwan. I don't believe we do that. I'm worried that we are so weak that it invites these bullies to do the kinds of things that they might not do because they fear. Remember that nuclear deterrence, the whole concept of nuclear deterrence was that both sides are afraid to use the nuclear bomb. So they have them, but they're not going to use it because they know the other side will use it. Once you realize the other side may not be capable of following through on that, there's a temptation with some crazy person who might take over China, who's taken over Russia. This guy has gone off the deep end to restore the Soviet Union, to dominance. And Netanyahu is not my favorite Israeli leader. He's an extreme right-wing fanatic who's been indicted, and he knows the only way to offset the indictments is to feed into this violence that's taking place there. This helps him. But if we for some reason saw a more radical leader there, I think we would be in a lot of trouble. And that concerns me. And I don't think Biden would be the person to prevent that from happening.
Well, you may be right. I disagree with you on that matter. I think we will defend Taiwan. I think Joe's capable enough of making that decision. Certainly the people around him are. But I'll tell you another thing that's going on. Our good friend JFK Jr.,
right.
he's really for pulling out of all these countries, not getting involved in these wars whatsoever, spending that money here.
Right.
Okay. There is Trump really has, in essence, said the same thing. If they don't come up with their fair share of money, I'm not going to defend them. There is a growing movement in this country for us to pull back from foreign entanglements. Okay. Yeah. I happen to disagree with it. I think for the good of the world, we, the United States of America, has to lead. We have to be the policemen of the world.
Right.
But a lot of people in this country don't believe that anymore. I think it's far from being a majority, but I bet you 25% of the people would be very happy if we pulled out of Taiwan, pulled out of supporting Israel, and stopped supporting the Ukraine. I think that's very unfortunate, but I think that's growing because people are not happy with the government we have here. And the number one issue, as you have mentioned, besides those that I mentioned and all the money we spend there, is the border.
Yeah. So before we go to the border, I just wanted to point out that I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl. Robert F. Kennedy had a big Super Bowl ad that played into the campaign theme that was run by, I think, John F. Kennedy and his father, Robert F. Kennedy. So after the Super Bowl, that was $7 million he spent on that 30-second commercial, which I found very inspiring. But he was so criticized by some of the members of his family who are so far left, and he's so much more in the center and a little conservative, I think. They were upset with him, and he had to issue an apology on that. But honestly, I don't think he should have issued an apology, because I see politicians use political messages from the past all the time. And there is no Kennedy iconic face to the Kennedy family anymore, other than Robert F. Kennedy. Who else do we think of when we think of the Kennedys? Caroline Kennedy, maybe. The Kennedy Center, possibly, but no politician. Robert F. Kennedy is the face of the Kennedy family, and I think it was very appropriate for him to do that. I'm not sure he would be the best president, though, but that was the controversy. They're doing everything they can to attack him.
Well, I was very much impressed with that commercial the first time I saw it in 1960. Right. John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
They used it. John F. Kennedy had that commercial in 1960. All they did was change from JFK to RFK.
RFK, right.
Oh, I thought it was a good commercial then. I thought it was a good commercial on the Super Bowl. And he should not have apologized. There was no reason.
I agree with you. I think he should have remained tough and said, you know what, I have a right to do that, whether I'm related to the Kennedys or not. But the fact that I am related to him, I have a right that I'm going to maintain his legacy. Who else is going to maintain the Kennedy legacy other than Robert Kennedy?
There's no copyright on that. That commercial is 60 years old.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, effective today, but it is.
All right, let's spend a few minutes then out in the New York's 3rd District.
Okay.
George Santos had exaggerated his resume so badly he was forced out of office as the congressman from the 3rd District in New York. They had a special election this week. It was a Republican district, or at least described as a Republican district, but a Democrat won, a guy I'd never heard of, but he did hold office there before, Thomas Suozzi. He did that how, Bill? He did that by embracing some conservative issues, right?
There was no question about it. He ran as a Republican in that district, and he won. He won rather handily. He came out very strongly against the problem in the border, and that we have to do something about it now, not in 6 months or not in a year, but now. He also talked about the fact that both the Democrats and the Republicans have to get together for the good of the country, and they have not been doing so. So the two main reasons he wanted to go back to Congress was, one, do something about the border, and number two, try to bring the two parties together for the good of the United States of America. I applaud him for that. He's going to have to run for re-election in a relatively short span of time, but I think he should win, because that really has been a Republican district. The reason that, it's a Republican district. He represented that district for 6 years. Then he stepped down, and then that other guy who did have a problem with his
George Santos.
George Santos. So it's a district that Republicans, I think, should win. This guy, I think, will win.
And you know what's so impressive about this guy who I never heard from? I was impressed by him also on election night. And again, because he did embrace an issue that's ascribed to the Republicans, which is a conservative but good issue. We need to strengthen the border. He made it an issue. He wasn't shy about it. He outbordered the person that was running against him on the Republican ticket and handily beat them. And I don't hear anybody else like Tom Suozzi, who is out there saying we need to stop looking at issues as a partisan way. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. We need to address these issues. It was just refreshing to hear somebody like him. I'm wondering if he doesn't have a future in higher office as a consequence of what he did.
Well, he may have. I'll tell you what, his campaign is a blueprint for other people, other Democrats to run on. And I think if they do that, they'll recapture the House of Representatives. Now they're running talking about Republican issues, but nevertheless, if they do it and they articulate it correctly, I believe they'll wind up winning a number of the districts and flipping the House back to Democratic.
And that's what polarization does. It takes issues that are really national issues and somehow makes it a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. immigration is not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a national issue. And I think that people are responsive to it. We need something done because we are spending a lot of money on people who are just walking into this country. And it's not about blocking immigration. We should have immigration, legal immigration. There should be a process to vet these people. But instead of coming together, look at the Democrats and Republicans today. They can't even agree on anything. This guy, though, grabbed the topic away from them. And I think you're absolutely right. He is a blueprint for a successful person to run for national office. And that's why I think, who knows, if he's good and he didn't boost up his resume the way George Santos did, he could run for president in a few years and after this election coming up.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think that he was really quite amazing to me that he ran the way he did run. And we have to somehow bring these parties together because it weakens America. It makes it look weak with other countries, as you have pointed out on countless occasions. And most people blame the president for it. I don't really know if it's the president's fault, but people like to see a man who's in charge, a man that can, get something done in Congress of the United States. Joe, in most cases, hasn't done it. He did it with an infrastructure bill, but everybody benefits from an infrastructure bill. There's a few other things he did that everybody benefited from. So it wasn't that difficult, but there has been no Democratic issue that he has really, tried to deal with, and he's failed, unfortunately. For him, go ahead.
I was going to say his administration, he is the president, but I don't think he's surrounded by very strong, forceful national personalities that show strength. I don't see Blinken as being a very strong Secretary of State. I just don't see people around him being tough the way Reagan was in his final 4 years in his last term. He had strong people around him that you felt confident with, even though Reagan had some issues, cognitive memory issues toward the end there. I don't see that with Biden. That's the scariest thing. Both of these spaces should be covered, and they're not. So, but anyway, Bill, I think we hit anything else that we missed that we wanted to talk about?
I don't think so, Ray. I mean, no, I don't think so. That's about it. I just thought of something, but no, I'm going to save that for next week.
And I'm going to say I don't remember what else we were going to talk about. So, memory is an issue, but I'm not the president of the United States. So I can mix up a word here and there, and I can mix up and forget about a topic.
My final word will be, I don't think Joe Biden is that bad with his cognitive ability, but I don't think he's good enough to be the president of the United States again.
And I agree with you. All right, everybody. Bill, thank you. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And we will talk to you again next week. We may do an early edition on Monday of next week because of some scheduling issues between us, but we appreciate all of you listening to us at twoguysonpolitics.com. Talk to you later, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for listening to us, including all those supporters of Robert F. Kennedy who really boost up our numbers up there. So, all right, bye-bye, everybody.